Intro to Value Streams, Why Your Agile Organization Should Care. I'm Kenzie Fetzer with Targetprocess, and I'll be kicking us off today. We've partnered with some excellent speakers for today's webinar. Presenting will be Greg Johnson, industry veteran and Agile implementation expert. He'll be joined by Al Shalloway, founder and CEO of Net Objectives, who will share some tactical examples from real-life scenarios through his consulting business. Before we start, let's take care of some housekeeping. We will be accepting questions during the webinar. If you want to ask a question, just type it into the chat feature in the GoToWebinar control panel. We will attempt to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar, and if we don't get to your question, we'll try to follow up over email afterwards. We will be recording this webinar, and after either this afternoon or tomorrow morning, we'll share out the video of the recording and the slides. So at this time, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Greg Johnson.
Thank you, Kenzie. I'll begin today with going over our agenda. The first, as we said, this is a introduction to value streams. I call it Value Streams 101. So why do we want to talk about value streams, and why should an Agile organization care is where we'll start the presentation. Then we'll give a very simple, non-software basic example of a value stream, just so you get a feel for what it is and what type of events, processes, and work you want to measure. And from that, we'll see that the type of insights you can get from a value stream, and we'll transition then into how those help a software organization. This is where Al will jump in and provide quite a bit of insight into how organizations can best analyze their value streams and look at areas where they can improve their efficiencies. And then we'll end with some metrics. There's value streams are, it's very important to have accurate understanding of the time frames it takes to do work in specific steps and how much delay there is. So we'll talk a bit about that, and then we'll open it up for questions. So why value streams? We did a lean portfolio management, Targetprocess did, in December. And it was very interesting. It was focused, I would say, a fairly broad overview on lean portfolio management. It was put on by some of the folks from SAFE. It was well attended. And what was really interesting is a lot of the participants had expressed their movement to using scaled Agile, whether it was SAFE or it was any type of Agile at scale. But what we really found interesting was when we ran the surveys. We found out that only 21%, and we had well over 100 folks respond to this survey, only 21% had even defined their value streams, which indicated that maybe they weren't as far along their Agile journey as they start. And then when we asked questions later on about how many of you are coordinating your value streams effectively, the answer was 0, and that was really stunning. So clearly, there was a lot of interest in understanding how to define a value stream, map it out, understand it, and then coordinate them. And lastly, when we asked about metrics and measurements that folks use to measure progress, 70% were still using what I'm going to call some of the older waterfall-ish metrics of stage-gated milestones and reports to measure progress. So while we talk about some of the metrics today, we'll make sure we show you some of the more Agile-type metrics that apply when you're attempting to look at your organization in an Agile way and analyze your flow of work using value streams. Okay. I'm going to let Al jump in and describe here, just from a business level, what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. This is a kind of a visual representation of what we view you should be doing conceptually anyway on when you're doing development. The upper left box should look fairly familiar. It's like strategic planning and lean portfolio management. It's how you go from your objectives and key requirements to building a business backlog. But that's all in the business aspect of things. Then you have to refine the backlog. And at some point, you get to actually planning where it's going to get into technology. Those of you who know SAFE, this is not a rendition of SAFE. This is something we've been doing a long time ourselves. But you can see some of the pattern of it, that you're going from lean portfolio and product management then into a planning event where you decide how you coordinate things, then the teams work across each other, and there's implementation and integration. Hopefully this is happening continuously, and then you release. Now, one of the important aspects of the value stream is we want to use it to expose when we're having problems. So there's this term called cost of delay, and it's really a simple concept. It's if you're building something that's going to get you $200,000 a month in revenue, or avoids a loss of $200,000, you know, by compliance or whatever it is, then every month that project is delayed costs you $200,000. That's all it means. That's all cost of delay means. So if you think about this flow, you can start from where I'm like refining the backlog until it's released. What happens? Okay, Greg, hit the next. The question is what happens? Now, we often hear about, you know, projects being delayed, and it's really, oh my God, all these delays. But delays are actually more of a sequence of small steps, small delays that cascade on each other. It's not one big delay. I mean, if you've done waterfall, you might discover that you have a big delay, but that big delay built through a sequence of small events. So now you can just go through. We want to use the value stream to identify these delays so we can see them. So yeah. So what happens is there are different delays in different areas. We have delays in identifying, delays in refining the backlogs. Throughout the value stream, we have these delays, both within a team and across the team. So if you think about this, this is like almost so obvious. It's a question of why haven't we talked about this for so long? But if we're trying to eliminate the delay from the left to the right, then we need to see those delays, and they're all over the place. Now, in some organizations, they're worse than others. Also, some organizations, you have, not in some, but virtually all organizations, there's a cascading effect. Wherever, if you put too many delays up at the front, or you try to get past the delays by jamming more in, you have problems. So what we want to do is recognize one of the values of the value stream is to see the delays in our system so we can work on them and manage them, and also recognize that when we have delays, they actually cause unplanned work. So it's not just a delay of a day, it's what's that cascading effect. Okay, Greg, I'll let you take over to give a couple examples.
All right, great. So before I give a very simple example of a value stream, let's make sure we define what one is. It's very simple. And there's slight variations on this definition because there is no 100% agreed to definition, but the simplest one is it's a series of steps or activities that an organization follows to deliver value to a customer, stakeholder, or end user. The key components here are value, and the value is always from the perspective of the end user or the customer, not from the organization. Now, there are value streams that are internally focused. Okay, in that case, the organization is the end user, the customer. But when you do a value stream exercise or look at your value streams, you're always thinking about the perspective of the end user, the customer. And the stream is just the steps of activities that lead to value being delivered. They're typically the activities that your organization does, but they can also involve customers, and we'll talk about that as well. And all I have for the picture is just stickies. The way to start with the value stream is to look at how you get value to your customers today. Go ahead, use some stickies, map that out, and we'll talk in more detail about that. But I think what we'd like to do now is actually run a poll to determine what your interest is in value streams. So if you can run that, Kenzie, that would be awesome. And this should not take but a minute. So if you can just indicate whether you are new to value streams and just want to learn more, whether your organization has a pretty good understanding of value streams, and if your role in your organization is to help define and implement these value streams, we'd like to know that. And if we've got some experts out there, go ahead and designate yourself as such. And we'll see what we've got for an audience here when this comes up. I think we'll give them another 10 seconds, and that should be enough. Oh, I see data still coming in. We're about 80% of you have voted. Well, maybe that other, oh, there's still votes coming in. Okay, just a few more seconds. Almost 85%. All right, it looks like we slowed down. Why don't we wrap that up and let's present the results to everybody here. So 60% of you are new to value streams. That makes sense, since in our last webinar, we had found that only 20% had defined them. We've got some organizations that understand them, and we do have a good. We've got about a quarter of the folks have actually got the responsibility to define and implement value streams. So we're glad to have those folks here. And other than that, it looks like maybe we've got one or two other experts here. Okay, sounds great. I think then I feel that we've organized our webinar today just about right for the audience, and I wanted to verify that. Great. So let me jump in and talk about why we do value streams. There's really one reason. It's to illuminate where our waste and delays occur. Anyone who's been in Agile or Lean knows for a while that our goal is to get value to the customer faster. And the best way to do that is to look for where we have waste, which is work that does not provide value to the customer, or delays where work products just sit and aren't moved forward. So the reason we do value stream mapping is to understand and visualize, see where those delays occur. And before we jump into how you do this for software, I'm going to give a very basic example. As I said, this was Value Stream 101, but I think this is going to illustrate the concepts of value streams. So recently got a new house, and we had the upstairs remodeled before we moved in, but the basement was completely not done. And our situation was we get house guests quite often. And last May, we happened to have 5 guests at one time. It was quite a big event, and we typically get at least almost one weekend a month someone staying with us. But the reality is that we only had one bathroom, and all the bedrooms upstairs were kind of close. So we wanted to provide our guests with a comfortable, more private space when visiting. So we wanted to remodel the basement. So our primary value is for our guests to get privacy and comfort when they visit us. Because we were on a budget, we were going to do some of the work ourselves and outsource some of it. So we kind of mapped that out, and we came up with our version 1 of a value stream, and this is it. So I apologize. I don't know if for some of the graphics here that got a little messed up. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just my screen. But what we see here is the steps that we wanted to go through to remodel the basement, from demolition of the current structure to framing new walls, wiring, electrical, and so on and so forth. And what you'll see is some of these are done internally by ourselves, and some of them are done by contractors. And the work itself all adds up to only 38 days, but the delays of waiting between handoffs of all the different experts who are coming in is 70 days. And you come up with what we call in lean management and value stream mapping, process cycle efficiency of 36%. This is actually pretty good for a software company to have 36%. But for construction, obviously, this is a long time. It's 104 days until we're actually going to get any value. Now, one of the things we'll notice is, why are these delays here? And this is common also in a software company. The reason the delays are there is it becomes easier to manage the handoff between a series of technical experts if there's a decent separation of time between them, because the last thing you want to happen is the electrician to show up and do the wiring and the walls aren't framed. So organizations they inject delay into their own value streams because it makes them easier to manage. But the problem then is it pushes the work out, okay? So it has while you do it to make the process easier to accomplish, it actually has a negative effect on the customer. So that was our first decision. Then we looked at it again, and we decided that wasn't going to work, that it was going to be too long. So we actually broke that larger value stream into 2 value streams. One was, let's just do the bathroom first. That would be a huge benefit for our guests to be able to have their own private bathroom. And then we'll do the 2 bedrooms in the basement second. So now we have 2 value streams running in parallel. And we were able to do that because we could do the demolition all in the first step. And then as soon as we framed the bathroom and did that first. While the rest of the framing was gone, we wired the bathroom, put in the fixtures for the bathroom, the walls and doors for the bathroom. We didn't do the finished paint and the finished trim, but it was actually a usable bathroom in under 40 days. The whole project still took about 108 days. But the key to notice here, when you break a large value stream down, if you want to make it into separate value streams, you have to minimize the dependencies between them. If there had been strong dependencies, in other words, if the bathroom had been organized in such a way that the wiring and the plumbing could not be done while an electrician was there or while other drywall was being added, it would not have worked. So if you're running multiple value streams, make sure there are few dependencies between them. So there's a very simple example, introduce some of the concepts of value streams. What did we observe? We observed that the key concept of value streams is multiple independent teams must be coordinated to achieve the desired result. We want to minimize our time until we realize value. And almost all the waste or the delays or the queues or even the errors, you'll find as well, they occur during a handoff or a transition between teams. So that's a very simple example, but it really illuminates almost all the concepts of value streams. Now let's just move to software development, and then I'm going to hand this over to Al. So in software development, we have very similar goals. We want to quickly get value, working software, into the hands of our customers, whether they're internal customers for internal projects or external customers. We want to see early on where our bottlenecks are and waste are so we can optimize those areas. Now, you can do this in a very complex fashion, which we've seen, and I think you can do it very simply. It really depends on how large your organization is, how many different steps you need to go for, how many different teams, how complex your solution is that you're building. So all of those are critical to whether you have to have a simple do stickies on a board or whether you actually need to get a hold of some value stream mapping software, which exists out there to actually better visualize. But no matter how you do it, you need accurate measurements. You need data on how long in each of the steps that you define, how much time it takes the work to be done, how much delay there is before either during that process or in the handoff, and if there are any quality issues or rework associated with that. And at that point, I'm going to hand this off to Al, who's going to dig deeper into this in terms of software.
Okay, I'm on. So the thing is, excuse me. The thing is that what we're trying to do is continuously improve, and we want to look at why do we get delays. So obviously, if we have manual steps that can be automated, for example, if we're not doing automated testing, then every time we want to get to testing, we're going to have delays, and that's some way to speed things up. People think about automated testing as a way to get better quality, which it is. Of course, that alone would make it worthwhile, but also the time it saves us to get delivery, it makes it worthwhile. So this is an interesting, I'm going to use this first example as an interesting phenomenon we have, which is that closing delays also improves the quality of work. Now be clear here, a lot of times lean thinking has been talked about going faster. That's actually not true. I've heard it called faster, better, cheaper. But in reality, what it's about is removing delays. And so you go at the same speed, you go at the right speed to get your work done. You're just trying to avoid the delays between the steps. Hang on one second. Okay, so work piles up at handoffs between teams or systems. In fact, what we want to do is get as much flow as we possibly can. That's actually, that the work just continuously goes forwards. Communication gaps, resulting either we don't have the information in a tool. One advantage tools provide is everybody can see the same information in the same way, and communication is much faster. we might have capacity constraints in terms of some people are needed on several different development endeavors, which means you have to wait for them. So these bottlenecks occur as a combination of we don't have our capacity matching to our needs, or our infrastructure doesn't provide us with the information we need. And so there are a variety of things we want to understand that delays are a cause of a particular system. Okay, Greg, next slide is good.
Oops.
Yeah, that kind of came up messed on my
Yeah,
screen.
that's same with mine. I'm going to try and let me see if I can fix that. I'm not sure why that's happening. I might
Greg,
switch.
can you try ending your presenter mode and then relaunching it?
Okay, I will try that. And that button is right there. Did I end my presentation mode?
Yes, now you can relaunch.
And relaunch just by hitting my presentation button?
Yep.
Okay, now let's see. I might just bring up the other version of the deck too, because I noticed this throughout. I'm going to try that as well. So let me try that.
And I'll tell you, while you're doing that, I'll just be talking from, the points anyway, since
yes.
There's no point to not. So, if you have to copy or move data is another thing. If you have internal processes that are mandated, they may not be actually adding value, but they may be slowing you down. Now, it's interesting, external regulations or regulatory approval might have to be, you obviously have to do them, and we complain about them as delays. Well, they do. You have to wait for them, but this is where you want to attend to things that are not beyond your control, or that are beyond your control. Sorry, and by that I mean if you know you're going to have a delay in getting a request fulfilled or meeting some demand that has to be reviewed by other people, then you have to account for that, and you want to see how can I shorten that delay. This is one of the nice things about thinking of it as a flow model, is that you're not saying I've got this set time period I have to do as you have with sprints and things, but you're saying that, well, I'm trying to shorten delays however I can. And of course, sprints and integration, things like that, do that. That's actually one of the things that's useful to keep in mind, is that what we're doing is actually trying to eliminate delays as we go. Okay, now I do think I'll need the slide up for the next one, Greg.
Okay. Is that visible?
That looks better.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is an excerpt from a value mapping deck we have, and in fact, I'll send you when Kenzie follows up and sends you a follow-up, we'll point you to where these slides came from. And as Greg mentioned, value stream mapping can be very complicated or very simple. I vote for the simple, usually, at least at first, because what you really want to do is find the first order events. Now, this is at step 5, so it's mostly already been done, but basically you can see that we first just identify, like we've got a request, approval, requirement, sign off. This is of a waterfall example, obviously, so not an agile value stream here. And then we look at what the real time is. In other words, like it took us to get approval, it took us a whole day. To do requirements took us 4 weeks. The sign off was a day. And when you do these, we recommend always doing them in hours. It makes it easier to convert. The analysis took 2.5 weeks. That's 100 hours. And then we looked at, well, what time, like say when I was doing analysis, did we really have all of our people working on it 100 hours continuously, that whole 100 hours? And probably not, because they're working on something else most of the time. So in this case, it says, well, on average, people working 40 hours on this and 60 hours on other things. You'll notice value stream maps are not about effort, they're about time. So I'm getting a mapping of time, and we're doing that because we want to see the delays that are present. So that's why we have 40, 60, over 100 in the analysis box on the upper right, means we spent 40% of our time, 40 hours out of 100, working on this and 60 hours on other things. Okay, now those loop backs on the bottom row are, well, we detected something was wrong, so we had to try it again. So oh, I'm sorry, I skipped the step, which is those lines between. So we got requirements, but we waited 8 weeks until we got to the sign off. Then we waited 2 more weeks till we did analysis. Why? Because people are working on other things. Okay, and on average, people work on a lot of different things at a time. Now, sometimes in the design, analysis, code, and test, if we're doing that as a Scrum team or any kind of Agile team, basically, you'll find that those times go down a lot, and that's really useful. And that's why Agile teams work well. But on the other hand, what's not shown here is this is like presuming for a team, what are the times across teams and things of that nature. Okay, next slide would be great. So what we want to do, though, is now, this is what Greg was talking about, the process cycle efficiency. We look at how much time was actually spent on average working on this, not the number of man hours, but if I looked at from the beginning till the end, 509 hours was actually spent. And go to the next slide, out of almost a year, almost 2 years. That's a year and 3/4. Okay. So this is a process cycle of efficiency of 15%. And waterfall, actually, you end up between 5 and 10% typically. If you're doing a maintenance organization, that can be as low as 5%. You can say, how can it be so bad? Well, think about it this way. In a maintenance organization, if you release every 3 months, but it takes you a day to fix, then I worked on a day, but it didn't get released for 3 months. So the release cycle is really important. So what we want to be working on are those red areas, basically, where we're not getting value done. Next slide. Okay. So this is, again, where I started out as cost of delay. This is a comment from Don Reinertson. This is a 9-year-old, 10-year-old book, but I tell you, it's still state of the art. Don's the foremost expert, in my opinion, on product development flow. And he says, if you quantify one thing, quantify the cost of delay. So what we see there with all the reds, that's the cost of the delay. Not to mention some of the reds where it's hard to see it, but you'll see how it's bolded, like under requirements. That 100 hours where we only worked on the requirements 60 of the 160 hours, that's the delay. Next click, there's something on the right. So this is a very key insight that the value stream can tell us about. And this is a big shift in the lean mindset and the flow mindset, as we call it. Instead of focusing on doing like coding faster or testing faster, what we want to do is focus on eliminating the delays between what you do. This is why acceptance test-driven development and test-first methods are so gaining in popularity, because they're so useful, because they eliminate the delay between developers and testers and product owners working together and discovering when an error occurred. We're not talking about coding faster. We're not talking about testing faster, except with perhaps automated testing. We're talking about removing delays in the workflow. Now, this is also why I say we don't need to have complex value stream maps, because these where the really bad delays are, the first pass in is they're usually so major you can just spot them once you start laying it out. And then after that, you start thinking in terms of delay, and that's a critical thing. Now, there's one other question to ask yourself. No, that's fine. Just leave right here. This is actually
sorry.
No, go back. That's good.
Oh, okay.
Either slide deck will work just fine. So remember this slide I showed at the beginning. Okay. So we talked about, this is that slide I showed earlier. We talked about the different delays are there. So it's an interesting question to ask, what is being done that causes these delays? I mean, here we talked about delays in identifying what is of greatest value and delays in refining backlogs. So how do we see these delays without a value stream map? So there's this other question is, you might be thinking, and I would be thinking if I was listening to you and wasn't familiar with value stream mapping, is you mean I have to map my value stream all the time and keep it up to date? That seems like a lot of work. And the answer is that would be a lot of work, but that's not what we're actually recommending. And Greg will show you some examples of this in the Targetprocess tool. We want to understand delays are the problem, but the easiest way to see the delays are actually what we call queues. So imagine if I'm getting, say, delays due to the teams, this big one in the middle, delays due to the teams not collaborating well. I didn't mean by size that's the biggest problem. I meant by size that goes across the teams. Well, if they start having problems in collaboration and they're not getting their work done and they're not integrating well and things like that, you can imagine that backlog to the left or the backlog to the left of that is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So we can see delays in software by looking at the queues, the amount of work that's waiting to get done. And delays directly correlate to the work that's getting done. And the amount of work in these queues have three factors to attend to. What is the size of the items? Obviously, what are the number of the items? You also have to do with how long if something takes, like if it's manual testing, then that's going to take longer than if it's automated testing. So if there's a significant time difference in getting it accomplished, and obviously then you have to look at the queue and see what's the capacity I have. So if there's a mismatch in capacity versus what's in the backlog, then you'll have a problem. So the thing to notice is by looking at the value streams, by understanding that delays are something we're trying to avoid when they're on the critical path, so to speak. Some delays, if it's not making any difference, doesn't matter. You know, it's like in the airport line, you have to get through 2 checkpoints. The first one is actually 3. Am I getting in the line because I have a boarding pass? That doesn't usually make any difference there, but it's later in when you get your ID checked, and then later even again. One of those is the critical path. One of those is the thing that's slowing you down. Delays there are important. So what we want to do is be able to see those, and we can see those by looking at the queue size and the number of things in the queue, the size of those, time it takes to do them, and the capacity we have in the system. So these are all things we need to have visible to manage the delays. Okay, Greg, I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right, awesome. We're going to actually do another poll here. We are curious how many of you have already mapped out your value streams. If you could bring that poll up, Kenzie, that would be awesome.
And Greg, we can't see your screen change.
Oh, okay. Hang on here.
I'll launch the second poll now while you're figuring that out.
Okay. And I'm going to still try and switch to a different present. There's our poll. So the answers here that we can have are, have you completed a formal assessment, or have you done a informal one where you've looked at your value streams? You've tried it, or you've never tried it, but you're planning to, and you are not planning to do it. So we'll go ahead and let folks submit. Looks like we're a little over half done. And we will wait just another 20, 30 seconds here. Let folks get their votes in. Okay, let's go ahead and bring up the results. So it looks like we've got about 60% who've never done it. And of those 60%, 50% are planning to. So that's great. And then we've got about a third who've either done a formal assessment or done it informally. And just by, I see a couple of questions have come in, and I'm wondering if I shouldn't, I think what we'll do is we'll continue on, and then we'll just queue up all the questions at the end since we're getting close to the end. But this is great. Since about 60% have never gone through a value stream mapping exercise, we can talk a little bit about that. I think some of the questions we have will help with that as well. And we'll continue on. Thank you for that. So, and I hopefully, even though we've got some issues here with the slides, I'm not sure why. I think we can still see the words here. What you need to do value stream mapping is good metrics. And you need metrics around lead time, which is lead time, I'll just define it very simply, is the time from what we call a trigger, from when a customer wants some value, they request something, to the time they actually receive the value. The process time, which is the amount of work that your organization does, total time, to create that value. And then, of course, the ratio of process time to lead time is important. We talked about that, process cycle efficiency. And then you need quality and accuracy metrics. Are you actually delivering quality work at each of those steps? Are you delivering quality work overall? And some of the most useful reports that we see in Agile are lead and cycle time. I'm going to show some examples of these. And these can be by features or epic or stories. Really valuable is time that works is done in a particular state, whether it's planning, requirements, development, test. Being able to visualize that is very important to create an accurate today's state of your value map. And then, of course, you can, from that, see how you want to change it. Kanban boards, I think everybody's pretty familiar with them. I won't be showing demos of those today, but those are actually more useful, especially with WIP limits, after you've gotten pretty successful at mapping out your value streams and you know what your WIP limits are. And a WIP limit is just a limit on amount of work that can be in any single state, for those who are unfamiliar. That's actually a more advanced concept in value stream mapping. And since a lot of people haven't even done their value stream mapping, we won't really spend a lot of time on those today. Now, Targetprocess, who's sponsored this webinar, and we want to thank them, has been involved in some research by Forrester. There's a new report out called the Forrester New Wave Value Stream Management Tools. I just want to quickly tell you about this. It talks about a lot of different tools available for performing value stream management. Targetprocess did very well in this, and I'm going to actually use their software to show you some of the reports and metrics and views you can get out of it. And what it really allows you to do using these reports is it allows you to ask the right questions. And with those questions, you can make the right decisions. You need information to make better decisions, to map your current value stream and to improve it. And two of the ways that Targetprocess can help that is, number one, it's really a visualization tool. It focuses on visualization capabilities, and it's very customizable. As these quotes from Forrester's Value Stream Management report show, it's really easy to create dashboards that are tuned to particular individuals to allow you to see the value stream from very many different roles. And even more important, the metrics that it provides, as you'll see in these next few reports, are very easy to understand. This is an example of a dashboard that you would use if you're doing value stream analysis. On the upper left is mean time to value. So how long does it take us to actually deliver value? To the right, upper right, is value added time versus waste. So this is time that's actually work that is going towards delivering value to a customer versus waste. I think most people are familiar with the cycle time report, which shows at any one time the status of our different work items. And then we have another cycle time by team report. Let's dig deeper into these metrics so you can see how they can be used. This value time to market report shows you the amount of touch time versus wait time. And what immediately becomes apparent is we spend a lot more time with items sitting around not being worked on, where they're just not moving. And this is an aggregate report that's built into Targetprocess that you can easily create. Here's a trend report showing cycle time on both user stories and bugs. Clearly, we want to reduce cycle time. In this case, we're seeing that, at least in terms of defects, our cycle time, the trend is good. It's deleting. And for user stories, it's actually increasing. So we want to maybe look at that value stream. What is causing our cycle time to increase? This is a process control chart that's built into the application. And here you can look for outliers. Why did particular, in this case, it's user stories. Why did a particular user story take much longer than a specific? It looks like our trend lines are right in here between 15 and 20 to 25 days, but we've got two outliers. So we would want to know why. And you can drill in and actually see why. This is a very useful report here, which shows you the amount of time that an item is being worked on versus the amount of time that it's just waiting. And you can see in each state. So for example, this item on October 17th, there were several hours of work. And look at this, it sat for 6 more days with no work. That is all waste. Then it was worked on quite considerably during these 2 days, maybe a half day here and so on. So what you get with these type of usage map is you can see when a particular work item is sitting around and when it's being worked on. So you can see your cycle time, your lead time versus the amount of work time. All these type of reports can be drilled down to any level of detail. There's a lot more I'm not going to go into today because I really want to go into the questions. And so let me jump to those right now. Kenzie, you had a few that had popped up. Do you want to?
Yeah. Let's start with, what is the main difference between operational and development value streams?
Sure. An operational value stream is overall value stream around the organization. It's where you start. You look at your entire operation of how does our company deliver value to a customer? Let's just say you're a bank. One of the ways you deliver value to a customer is through loans. So there's a whole series of steps from when a customer is interested in a loan, maybe from a commercial, all the way through they come into the bank to talk about it, all the way to the end. There's all kinds of interactions at that point that are part of that value stream. But the development part of the value stream is the software systems that contribute to the value of that overall operational value stream. And I'll let, I think we still got Al on the line. If you want to go deeper into that difference between operational and development value streams.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, the way to think about it too, one of the important things to keep in mind is that the development value stream of a company, if you're building software, is creating operational value streams of the other company. So it's worth keeping in mind not just what's the difference in your organization, but how does one affect other organizations. And this actually has a lot of advantages to it that people sometimes don't think about, which is very often software developers are more oriented or think more around how work is done than users. A lot of times users just take it as they're given work. So there's an opportunity when you write your software to not just say I'm developing software that does something, but I'm developing software that is going to affect how other people's work. And we should just keep that in mind. It's worth keeping the operational value streams of the customers we're writing for present in our head as we do that. So that's just an advantage of that distinction as well.
Great. Thank you, Al.
Okay, our next question is, how do we use value streams to help a company that is project-centric to become product-centric?
You're going to let me to take that one? That's a
yes,
great
go
question.
ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So the problem with projects is that you get a bunch of people together and you start working, and they have their own value stream then for that project. You know, because value streams are actually mapped. It's what actually happens. And when we talk about defining value streams, what we really mean is we're improving the value stream to work better, because the value streams are the way it is. So if you look at a value stream of a project and then notice the value stream of the next project and then notice the value stream of the next project, you'll notice that what you're doing is you're using different value streams with different capacities, and you have to reorganize and rethink. And the people, there's also a bigger delay typically because you get the project defined, but then what you have to do is you have to then wait for the capacity of the people being there to get it done. So you have a problem then with that as well. And so what happens with a project mindset, the value stream will detect that you're basically causing a lot of waste by redefining things all the time. So if you think about it from, if I had a product mindset, then what I would be doing is I would basically be having the same more or less value stream for the product, because I'd have some impact coming in, and I'd get it done, and then I'd go get the next part of the product or the next enhancement to the product. And you would see that the value streams of a product thinking organization are more consistent with each one. There's not the delay of having to reorganize the people to get them working on things. And you'll see that just by shifting from project to product, the value stream will illustrate you're saving a lot of time and you're keeping a lot of consistency in the work. And that's actually very important.
Awesome. Thank you, Al.
Yeah. Great question. Great question.
Awesome. Okay, another question is, hi, I'm a consultant with some notions of Agile. What would be the next steps to better understand your value stream model?
I'll let Al start, and then I'll jump in with my thoughts.
Well, I would do a real simple mapping. I'd get all the roles together in a room and spend an hour talking with each other and seeing where the handoffs are and seeing where the high level of delays are. And again, this is just the start. Then Greg can talk more about how you would use tools such as Targetprocess to continue to get the information. So, and like I said, we'll send you a simple value stream mapping method that you could use. But it's about getting all the roles so you can see the value stream.
Yeah, I agree. Getting the, first thing too is to design how do your customers receive value. Start there. That allows you to define 1 or 2 or 3 value streams, and then identify the different groups. As Al said, you got to get all the right people there, and they either need to be in the same room or at least on a conference call so you can talk about it. And then you need to get some general data, because most often people just make assumptions. Well, we think it takes this long, and the reality is either you got to get down on the floor, as they say in Lean Gemba, to see where the work is done, or in software you actually have to get tools to get in and measure and see how long does it really take. Like some of those charts I showed, we saw that a developer may only spend 2 or 3 hours on an item, but it sits for 7 days. And unless you actually have a tool that can measure that, you're just going to guess and say, well, it only takes us 2 hours. So actually get accurate data on your activities, how long they take, and most importantly, the handoffs between folks and where those delays are.
Awesome.
Anything else, Kenzie?
Yeah, I think we have one last question to wrap up. In regards to development processes, what is the best way to integrate value streams into a development process that contains software, mechanical, electrical, firmware, and manufacturing, where there may be a combination of Kanban, waterfall, and agile development workflows?
Oh, let me take this. I love this.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Okay. So this actually, you have to shift mindsets on this. So let's look. So I might answer this a little long because it actually is an important question, not just for this particular one, but for what is the relationship between Lean and Agile. So from past surveys, I'm expecting a lot of you have at least some knowledge of SAFe, and almost all of you, I'm sure, have some knowledge of Scrum. And both of these are what we call iterative methods. Like SAFe, you have the program increment, which can be anywhere from like 6 to 14 weeks, and you get together and everybody talks and plans about how they're going to incrementally build and in sequence incrementally build. And when you're at something like Scrum, where it's just the team, it could be anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks, something like that. But you're incrementally planning, incrementally building, and you have this set cadence. Now, this is not a bad thing, but it's worth understanding what the trade-off is. What you're doing with these set cadences is you're creating, and I know I have not answered the question yet. This is when everything is on the same cadence, but I want that to be built first in our mind. What we're doing is, this is a simple way and a disciplined way to get people started on managing flow and removing delays. Think about it from the Scrum perspective. If I say I'm going to do 2 weeks of work and I have a team that does that, notice how my flow will be good and my delays will be short, because the handoffs will be team members. And within 2 weeks, if I said this is what I can get done, I'm not going to overload myself, which is the primary way that we actually create extra delays. Now, the same thing it's at the SAFe level, which is if I'm at the program level anyway, I've got where all my teams are working together to the same cadence. I at least have lowering the amount of work in process to what the teams think they can do, and I'm lowering delays. So we want to realize that Scrum and SAFe are iterative methods of trying to lower delays and improve flow, but they're just that. They're an iterative approach, and there's another way to go. Now, I'm not saying you have to get off SAFe or Scrum to do this, but you have to look at what's the common factor that we're really trying to do. At the other extreme is Kanban, where you're just doing a flow model. And in fact, most organizations should use some places it's Scrum better, some places Kanban's better. And net objectives, we do what we just call team agility, which comes from this lean or flow model. And then we tailor it to the team that's doing the work for what suits them. Okay, so now let's get to the question answer, because I think it's important to realize that the answer is going to be, you're going to have to not abandon iterations, but you're going to have to look at them in a different way to solve this problem. By the way, this isn't just a problem when there's hardware or some sort of manufacturing, and it might have been in the question, but if you're dealing with non-agile organizations that are even doing software, but they're just not doing agile, it's the same thing, because they may be on a different cadence from you. So the thing we want to look at is directly focus on what is the delay that's occurring and what are the capacities I have, and use a value stream map. Now, notice the value stream map includes not just our own work, but it has to include these others. Value stream is end to end. It's basically if it includes me or my group that is agile and it includes another group that isn't agile, then the value stream map is going to cut across my organization and the other organization. The value stream is not just the work I'm doing, but it's the work that's all the work that needs to be done to get value to the customer. So it's from the customer request until it goes out the door. So what you're going to see in the value stream is probably long delays when the handover goes between my company or your company and the other company you're working with. So obviously that's your problem, and you know this is your problem. But by creating a value stream, you make it explicit, you make it visible. And now what you can do is start looking at, how do I remove these values? How do I remove these delays? For example, let's say you're building software for a hardware organization. I mean, you're building software and there's a hardware organization you're dependent upon. Well, one way to remove some of the delays going back and forth is to build a mock that looks like the hardware, so you can have a definitive agreement on what the hardware and what the software looks like is supposed to use. And so you could actually get the software going while the hardware is being used. So a mock in that case would make sense. A mock is, sorry, I'm not sure I defined it. A mock is something that looks like the hardware, but it's on the software side. So what you want to do now is, by having this whole value stream, and you talk about the delay from start to finish, and it includes both organizations, and you see that the big problem is in the delays between the organizations, then what we can start doing is teaming up with them to see, how do we reduce those delays? Okay, long answer. Was that sufficient, or is there more clarification wanted on that? I know that was a bit of an answer there.
I think it's great. It's a difficult question, but I think, once again, it comes down to visualizing those delays at the handoffs and finding a way to mitigate them. But no, I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah, let me actually say one more thing, Greg, just because the way you said that, I don't know, it prompted me. So one of the problems we often get in software is local optimization. One of the values of the value stream is it shows us the big picture. So it's not just about the software getting their job or the hardware getting their job. In this case, it's not just like a team and a safe organization getting their job, it's the whole organization. So upping up that visualization is critical in the value stream to do that. Okay, I'm done with that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I've seen organizations where one group, particular software group, their actually work time and workload increased, but in doing so, the overall value stream was shortened. And you have to always look at the big picture. And that example that was given there was obviously a very big picture with lots of handoffs, lots of organizations. And the key is to optimize for the whole, not just for one specific part. Great. I think, are there any other questions, Kenzie?
We have several other questions, but I think we should follow up over email with those ones.
Okay, great. There is some contact information for both Al and myself. Hopefully you can see those on your screen. So if you have questions that aren't going to fit into this format, please feel free to drop us an email. We'll be glad to answer them.
Yeah, and this is Al. I just want to point out, we do a wide range of things, as you can see by the labels there, but I'm always happy to chat. So if you have particular questions, drop an email, but if you also kind of want a free consult or something, I'm always happy to do that. I am a nice guy, but it's not just that I'm a nice guy. This is actually how I learn, as I see what people's problems are. Our view is that you have to solve the problems of the organization, not take preset solutions that are, in my mind, unfortunately, what's being promoted a lot in the industry. We use tools like SAFe. In fact, I'm a contributor and used to be an SBC trainer, but we like using them as tools, not as the total answer. So yeah, definitely please reach out and contact me, and I'll be happy to talk or respond via email.
And likewise, myself, I'm kind of more on the tools side, but if you have tools, not just about tools like Targetprocess, but any of the software tools that you're using across your value streams, and you just want to run some questions by me, once again, also, I'll be happy just to give you my free advice. I think that's it for the day. Thanks, everyone. And Kenzie, I'll let you wrap things up.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We will be sending out the recordings of this presentation and the slide deck in the next couple of hours, so stay tuned for that, and feel free to reach out to us with any questions. We will also make sure to respond to your questions that did not get answered during this time. So thanks again, and have a great day.